really good, inspiring information about academic innovation leadership. And the emphasis is on leadership. Everybody talks about innovation. Today we're going to talk about the change agents at the front lines who are really critical to academic innovation. So before we get started, I wanted to just get an idea of who's in the audience. If you are within a higher education institution, could you raise your hands? Wow, okay. An important topic for you then. What about ed tech? Okay, and nonprofit, foundations, okay. The money people, the investors? Oh, got one? Okay, cool, couple. Okay, great. Thank you again for joining us. I'm Ann Keene. I'm the CEO and founder of Quantum Thinking, which is a global education industry advisory firm and research firm. And what you see handed out and on your seats is an infographic of the research that we have just produced. Last year, we were in partnership with the University of Michigan's Center for Academic Innovation. And it's really a snapshot of looking at what leaders of academic innovation are thinking about, what do their staffs look like, what do their budgets look like, what are they focused on. It's really a cheat sheet for everybody in here who is curious about transformation, change, and innovation at institutions. And for those of you who are from the ed tech community, this is a really nice cheat sheet on what's important, and you get to know a little bit more about the persona of people who are actually making and driving the transformation. So to give you a little bit of an idea of how diverse this field is, and before I ask my first lightning round question, earlier when I was in a session, I could not read that sign up there. So I just am going to very quickly tell you their titles because it's really interesting. Actually, I'm going to let you tell your title. Just say your full long title. So James, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, with apologies then. So I'm the Special Advisor to the President at the University of Michigan, the Associate Vice Provost for Academic Innovation, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Academic Innovation.
Tom Andriola, Vice Chancellor and Chief Digital Officer at University of California, Irvine.
Hi, is this working?
Yes.
I'm Suzanne Dove. I'm Assistant Vice President for Strategy and Innovation and Founding Executive Director of the Davis Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning at Bentley University.
And I am Phil Regier. I am a professor of accounting, and I am University Dean for Education Initiatives, and I am CEO of EdPlus, all at Arizona State University.
Okay, now you know what I'm talking about. Very interesting titles, but all really focused on innovation, change, transformation at their institutions. So I'm going to start with a very meaty question, but I'm sorry, I'm going to ask for a lightning round response to this very meaty question, and that is academic innovation leadership. Is it a role? Is it a mindset? Is it a field? James, want to start with you?
I think it's a mindset. I think our backgrounds are quite different, so it's hard to place that into a field. We've got some great colleagues that would argue otherwise. The roles are, well, I'm going to stop there because you said lightning round, but I think it's a mindset.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I think it's a role, not a job, a role.
Yes.
I definitely think it's a mindset. And whether it's a field, I think it could be, but not yet.
Okay.
I think it's a mindset, and I think the people on this stage hold it as a role. Some people, there needs to be some people with this role, but a lot of people working in higher ed have to have it as a mindset.
It's a mindset, and I won't even justify my answer.
It's a mindset. Okay, great. All right, so just to situate a little bit, let's talk about your particular roles at your institution. And, where is it situated within the institution? Is it a dedicated unit? Is it dispersed? What's your reporting structure? And is there a strategic plan? I mean, are you designing to catalyze innovation? So, Phil, I'll start with you this time.
Sure. So, of course, I have a very complicated answer, which is in my role as University Dean, I report to the Provost. In my role as CEO of EdPlus at ASU, I report to a board which is chaired by the president of the university, Michael Crow. Just to be clear, EdPlus is an attempt to change the structure of the university in a way that would promote innovation, particularly academic innovation. And there's a kind of a famous quote at ASU. It says, if you don't change the structure of the machine will continue to do what the machine does. And so really, if you want to innovate, you have to change the structure of the organization, and EdPlus is an attempt to change the structure of the university organization to more clearly promote innovation, especially around academics.
Suzanne?
So I began at Bentley University just about 6 years ago, and I was asked to establish this Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning. And it was made very clear to me this was not intended to be a center for teaching and learning. It was intended to be a center for innovation through the educational offerings that the university would create. And it became very clear that an office of one person was not going to be able to accomplish the goals that we set out. And so a few years after I joined, we, under the direction of the president, did a strategic plan. And through that strategic planning exercise, we decided as a community to establish a whole division for strategy and innovation. So I actually felt like that was sort of my first success milestone, was convincing people that one office of one person was not enough. And so now we have a division headed by a VP of strategy and innovation who sits at the cabinet table. And I'm a member of his executive leadership team. We work extremely closely with the provost and the CIO, but the reporting line is to the president. And the initiatives that we are charged with really have to do with reaching more learner audiences. So I can go into that another point in the panel.
Tom?
Yeah, I think for me, so my role is asked to think even more broadly than just academic innovation, but all types of innovation and how we transform what we do inside the institution and in how we work with people outside the institution. And so, my role, most people you would say my role is an IT role, but IT now is this horizontal thread that runs through everything that we do. And so it gives me the opportunity to be involved in every conversation. And so I talk about the model as being, my job is to be the ultimate partner to the Batman, and I'm Robin. So I'm always looking for Batman. And then we're looking to the strategic plan for how to work the top-down element through what's important that we've put into the strategic plan. At the same time, trying to figure out also, how do we take advantage of something higher ed is really good at, which is grassroots, let 1,000 flowers bloom, and then figure out cross-pollination of those flowers so that we get strong momentum from the bottom up as well as top down, so we can create real institutional change.
So with one hat, I report through the provost, and with another to the president, but I think the constituents that are the 19 deans are really important in that equation, even though there isn't a formal reporting line, so that's really important. I think on the question of kind of centralized or dispersed, I started in 2014, and we had an office of one also, and we've grown that to about 115 people. So it's been pretty rapid growth for the higher ed sector. And when people talk about, they ask me how big will that get, and I've consistently said we'll probably top out at about 140 to 150 people in the sort of Center for Academic Innovation, but in a lowercase academic innovation way, we're going to continue to grow these roles across the institution, and that will look different in different colleges and schools to make sure we have this nodal network that's supporting the strategies of the schools. And I think the differences that we have in those models, not just duplicating it school by school, will be part of the success story ultimately.
Mm-hmm. So I was going to ask, but I think you all answered it, is do you see this leadership role growing in importance at your institution? And I think you pretty much have answered that. The research we did, and by the way, we started this research 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago. I was a senior fellow for technology innovation at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and we were looking at these emerging roles in support of doing things differently. If you're going to take faculty and students from textbooks and lecture, classroom-based lecture, what's the support infrastructure going to be like? And so over the course of 10, 11 years, what we've seen is these centers go from an average 6 people to 34 people, budgets going from $500,000 to 1.5, or actually 4.5 million, with the exception of probably James and Phil. You probably have much bigger budgets than that. But it's really interesting, and the data is showing that. So we have some longitudinal data about that. So if you're looking at that at your own institutions, there's some good benchmarking data there for you. What is the mandate of your role? Give the audience, if you will, what are the top 3 priorities that you are focused on? Suzanne, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. So a couple of things at the sort of highest, most abstract strategic plan level. My role in particular is responsible for fostering a culture of innovation across our campus. And so to the other people's points, I try really hard to work with people I think of as pollinators, who aren't going to just take an idea and try to do it all by themselves, but try to work with others, try to help us create those networks, because we are still a very small team. And so we need those people to be spreading and engaging with others. I think one of the more interesting things that our division is charged with, but I work very closely with our VP on, is really thinking about the integration of different types of adult working professional learners. And so how do we create sort of an integrated end-to-end lifelong learning system mostly in business-focused education? So post-baccalaureate, after people have left and gotten a college degree and they're out in the workforce, what are some ways that they might want something that's really bite-sized, or they might want something that's more of a 2-year master's degree? We're seeing less and less, of course, of people going full-time, but how are people fitting those different kinds of learning needs into their professional journeys? And I think there's really interesting work we can do with data, for example, where one of the powers, I think, of bringing us all into a single division is that we're working toward how can we integrate what we know about people in our non-degree space with people who might be interested in a graduate degree. It might sound simple, but as people in this room who work in higher ed know, a lot of times those two arms of the institution work very much in silos and do not share that information. We're trying to really think about the learner and the organizations that those learners work for, so that we can find ways to integrate that and then provide a much better pathway for those people to achieve their goals.
Okay. James, I'm looking at you. Yes.
Sure.
Top 3 priorities.
Happy to add to that. We have a very similar initial charge in creating a culture of innovation and learning, and there's certainly different emphasis at different periods of time, whether it's helping to future-proof initially, or when the pandemic is happening, how are we going to sort of rally in a quick way, or facing federal funding cuts right now. There's maybe more attention on revenue than there was before. But I think maybe the angle I'll take is part of the unspoken focus of what we do. So if I can be a little cynical about higher ed for a second, there's a culture that favors ownership over impact or outcomes, and which part of the campus is going to be in charge of something when we need to build really effective coalitions. And so part of what we're trying to do is create collaborations in our campus environments around sort of shared interests, shared goals, and finding ways for everyone to take some part in the success, to kind of buck some of the culture trends in that regard. So that's a big part of what we do. That's not on our website, that's not in the handouts, but it's, I think an important part of the impact in our work.
And with your now reporting to the president, you have this dual reporting structure you had talked about. It sounds like your priorities are aligned with the institution's priorities, or is that a way of trying to...
I think one way to interpret that additional hat is, many of the innovations which really started as inventions, and we've started to implement them more successfully so they stick within an environment, are now mainstreamed. And to your point, it's more than academic innovation. Some of this is about business model change or different ways to interact with the market forces around us. We also have, through my provost role, we look at the Ann Arbor campus, but the president is responsible for Dearborn and Flint as well. Those campuses have a very different student population, far more Pell Grant recipients, and so the kinds of needs that they have and the kinds of technologies and innovations that we might want to translate to those populations are pretty different. So I would say it's an extension of the kinds of work we've been doing, which is really maybe a proof point in culture building on campus.
Thanks. Tom, do you want to take it next?
Yeah, I want to take something James said, though, right? We peer with James's institution, even though we're half a country away, on data through the Unison consortium, and we peer on generative AI tooling, right? So we've adopted some of the things that they started, and we've tweaked them to work in our institution around data analytics and personalization. So I think the sharing of things is something we're going to have to get better at. The mandate for my role was pretty clear. We created it 5 years ago. It was basically transform everything that we do through a lens of how is technology, and then I force them to add data to that equation, and that the world is going to work differently because technology is becoming more and more capable, and I think the last 2 years have shown us that is absolutely true and accelerating. I think in terms of priorities, no matter what we would have said 90 days ago, I think we've all throw that playbook out the window, focus on the playbook, and it'll be changed next week. But I think for us, the priorities have become student success. That's not new, but it's defined differently now, because rather than just talking about student success as walking across the stage and grabbing a piece of paper and let's close the graduation gaps, we've moved the goal line on that to basically say first employment position is the new goal, because that's what families across America are saying. That's the value we see in a college education, is that what comes out the other end is an employable person in a position that required a college education who can start to build their independent life. A second thing that's really important is just what I'll call what's going on with the current administration, and just a recalibration of what our institutions can do and how much we're going to get funded to do that. It's fundamentally going to change, and when this industry is going to have less people in it than it's had previously. That recalibration is a fundamental priority. And then the third is, how do we work with industry? The funding is not going to come directly from NIH and NSF directly to us anymore. It will, but in much smaller percentages. This administration, how they think about things, they trust more of giving money to industry to create impact and value. May agree, may not, doesn't matter, that's what's going to happen. So we have to readjust how we work to get those dollars to come to us, because it's going to come through industry more than it is. So those have become the top priorities. They don't maybe state that on the strategic plan that way, but they're there. It's just that they've been really, really honed in by some of the recent changes that have happened to our industry.
I think strategic plans and playbooks are always evolving with the roles that you're in. Phil, I know you got started in 2009. You've been at the university 35 years, 5 jobs. What are your priorities now?
You didn't have to say that, Ann. Yeah, I've been here. So, in listening to my fellow panelists, I have to say my perspective on this is, I think, a little bit different. When I started, I moved from the College of Business into the Provost's office. 15 years ago, we weren't tagged as an innovation unit. We were tagged at solving a problem that the university had, and that is our charter requires us to provide access. We're a university who measures ourselves by who we include and how they succeed. And yet we had completely ignored and left out a huge segment of society, and that is the 40 million Americans who have some post-secondary education but no degree. And so the problem was, how do we enroll as many students as possible who cannot attend a brick-and-mortar university? And we did that by growing the number of online students and the number of online programs, okay? Now, what I always say is, if you solve a problem that nobody else has been able to solve before at quite the scale you're able to do it, people will start calling you an innovator, okay? And I think that's how I got stuck on this panel, okay? And so, my goals now, like my 2 pervasive goals for EdPlus, and everybody in EdPlus here knows them, We have to increase the number of students who are enrolling in and graduating from online degree programs. So last year, that number was 96,000. This year, the number is going to be 105,000. Next year, it's going to be 115,000. We'll graduate 17,000 students from online programs this year at Arizona State University. But the second thing is where innovation comes in, because the second thing is that we want to break barriers to higher education achievement through the application of new processes and tools and technologies. And so we have a dedicated research and development unit within EdPlus, and that research and development unit takes on, all universities do research, but they don't do research the way corporations do research. We have a dedicated budget that is focused on doing things that are planned. So it's like, it's not like, COVID hit and now we figured out how to teach online, right? I mean, if you take the Starbucks Achievement Plan, we did something that was planned, that was novel, that nobody had tried to do before, but where the outcome was uncertain. And I can tell you, R&D projects we've had that have failed as well. But each one of those R&D projects has as its end goal, if successful, it will either increase enrollment in ASU Online or at the university, or it will make students at the university more successful. And so a dedicated R&D unit, very clear goals around increasing the number of online students and their ability to graduate and be successful. Those are the things we're focused on.
Okay. So we're going to have a little fun now. I'm going to throw a question out that's going to allow you to be a little bit creative. If there were a documentary being made about your role, what would the name be of that documentary? And you can use an existing one, a future one, whatever. Just be creative. And since I'm going to pick on you since you got stuck on this panel.
Okay, so if I'm in a nice mood, it would be No Country for Old Classrooms. But if I'm in a nasty mood, like we've got to move things ahead and things are going too slowly at the university, it's got to be Gladiators.
Good. Okay, Suzanne.
I want to share a documentary that my family and I watched during COVID. It was called Pick of the Litter. And just bear with me for a second. So it's the cutest thing. It's about these puppies, these golden retriever puppies who are adopted, fostered by families who are actually preparing them to be guide dogs for visually impaired individuals. And it really makes me think about the role that we all have as sort of nurturing talent that's going to help someone somewhere achieve something that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do.
Okay, Tom.
I saw that. Really good. Mine would be open doors, closed doors, and locked doors.
Oh, wow.
Because in our institutions, I find, and before I was in this role at Irvine, I was at the dreaded system office, but it gave me a chance to see 10 universities work, so it was kind of like being in consulting and getting a really great view, at least a California view. But what I've realized is that there are doors that are naturally open in our industry. There are closed doors that, in a role like mine, it's my job to figure out how to open them. Mm-hmm. And if it's locked, the first question is why?
Yeah.
And now is the perfect time for us to challenge some of those sacred cows and say, why? We can't afford not to do something that maybe we said we couldn't do before. So open, closed, and locked doors.
Okay, good. Okay.
So when you asked this, I thought of the documentary, The Inconvenient Truth was the first thing I thought of. And I was thinking about sort of the problem solving we have to do in these kinds of roles, which is often in areas that are really sensitive to the people that are affected by the problem solving that we do. So just playing on that, I thought it might be called The Invisible Sleuth is the documentary for our team.
What do you guys think? Good? Okay. I'm going to get a little English major on you and ask you a question that has to do with, and I'm going to quote one of my favorite poets, and that is Alfred Lord Tennyson. He wrote the poem Ulysses, and he talked about the arc of experience. And so when you think about it's a metaphor, right, for all the things that we have learned in our past, and are they really going to serve us in the future as we continue to venture in our lives? So when you think about what had, maybe in your last 3 jobs, what prepared you for this role today? Tom, I'm going to start with you this time.
So first of all, I subscribe to that very much so. And I believe as you get further in your career, it's the summation of what you learn in those different experiences that gives you a very, very broad toolbox to be able to combine things that you've learned and experiences you've had from different places. So I really do subscribe. I think for me, there's always been an element of I've been attracted to the roles that are really hard, thorny, and especially if they say it can't be done, then I've kind of signed up for the roles. And so that certainly kind of applies. Interestingly enough, the consensus building that's required in our institutions, I didn't learn in higher education. I actually learned in the private sector working with a Dutch company. Most of you probably would know the company Philips, but the Dutch are a very consensus-based culture, and they actually even have phrases in their native language that say 99-1 is a tie. Now, if that doesn't sound like higher education, I don't know what does. So I came kind of understanding already, knowing how to kind of really work a large, complex organization, and then it was just a matter of really understanding the nuances, and that was the fun part, right? To me, taking on a new role isn't for me unless it both takes advantage of why they want to hire me, because I've done some of this before, with something I've never had the opportunity to do that both excites me and scares me a little bit. Mm-hmm. So to me, a lot of things have built upon my readiness to step in, mm-hmm. covered a lot, but it didn't cover everything, and some of that I'm still learning.
Okay. Phil?
Sure. So you've already mentioned I've been in ASU for 35 years, so it's hard. I can't even remember what jobs I had before that. But the fact is, at ASU, I've had several jobs, and oddly enough, being an accounting professor helped me a lot here because I taught courses. I mean, I have to tell you, income statements and balance sheets are not a bad thing to understand. University budgeting systems, by the way, for the most part, are horrendous, and if you could work your way through them, good luck to you. But I taught courses in shareholder value creation, and then when I was executive dean, I taught courses in entrepreneurship and leadership. And the other thing is I learned a ton from the management faculty. And the number one thing I learned from the management faculty is this notion that culture trumps strategy. Mm-hmm. So when I started in this role as, I can't remember what I was called. I can't remember what I was called. I was like online and dean of online and extended campus, that was it. I eliminated most of the positions. We went down to 10 people, and then I built the unit we needed to drive the expansion of online programming. And A, that's an incredible luxury, but B, it allows you to build the culture from a very small, changing culture, I think, is much harder than building culture. Changing a culture that's already in place, I was able to build a culture the way we wanted to do it, something that was agile and fast and flexible and had people with incredible talent in the areas we needed them. And so I actually did learn something from all the prior jobs I had that I've been able to apply, but I've also learned a great deal on the job from the very talented people that work for me now.
Thanks. Suzanne, do you want to share your journey? Your arc of experience.
I'll talk about a couple different things. It's super interesting to hear from the other panelists, too. This is a question that fascinates me. So my early career was in management consulting, and I worked in both public sector, multilateral institutions globally, and then eventually transitioned to the federal government, but in a very sort of professional services function, where a lot of what I did was go out and talk with people and try to understand people and uncover their realities and understand why the programs that they were in charge of might not be working the way that they could, understand where were their opportunities to improve. And it involved both, becoming good at listening and asking questions and quickly earning people's trust so that hopefully they would tell me what was really on their mind, because a lot of times you'll find out the best information from people who are at the front lines of doing the jobs themselves. They know what could be done better. And it also involved collecting data. And so I think that those two, sort of both hearing the narrative, getting close to the problem, and not being afraid to go to someone's office and just start asking them, what do you see could be done better here? What do you see as some of the issues here? And then trying to work with them and work with other really expert people to try to find solutions. The other thing that has been just irreplaceable for me in my career in academic innovation is the time that I've spent in the classroom. I've spent time teaching science to third graders, teaching literacy to adults who had never learned to read or write, and teaching business students at the undergraduate and MBA levels. And that really connects me with our students, which I consider a great privilege and something that I always, always keep in mind.
James, you've had a very boundary-spanning career.
I think, like Suzanne, I spent a lot of time in management consulting, and prior to coming to Michigan, I founded a practice in the Middle East, and so I worked in the Middle East for about 8 years. And I think that all of my roles until now have kind of shaped me in some way. But that experience is maybe a little easier to draw some direct connections to, and communicating across difference, across language, in new environments, learning how to go into discussions, whether it was with the Minister of Higher Education or the person whom I needed to get something through customs to put in our new office, just kind of problem solving in a very ambiguous space and entering those environments with a blank piece of paper, not the answer that I wanted to kind of push forward, I think was a really important experience. There's also in the Middle East, often the decision maker is not on the org chart. And learning how to navigate that is, maybe good preparation for dealing with a faculty senate or different university environments where the place of resistance or the place of support isn't always immediately obvious from the role that people hold.
So I would say what you have in common is risk-taking and collaboration, and you're not picking on I think maybe the best parts of some of your prior roles. Do you have any cautionary tales, like quick cautionary tale of like witnessing something that just did not go the way you wanted to go? Like, what would be your cautionary tale for having a role like this?
This week?
This week. That's a good one, James.
Oh, that's a big question. I think the thing I'm focused on a lot right now is, now 11 years into doing this work at Michigan, we're ready for big change at the institutional level, if not broader. And to get there, we really had to support a lot of individual faculty innovators, and that required launching pilots. And often it can be hard to unwind from some of those pilots. We sort of fall in love with supporting them forever, as opposed to knowing when we can actually maybe extract the learning from that effort and either double down because it has impact, or decide to layer those lessons learned into the next thing. So I think that's difficult. We even in a very well-resourced institution and center, we can only do so many things, and there's a throughput problem when we are supporting certain kinds of initiatives in perpetuity.
Yeah. Phil, do you have any cautionary tales or advice?
I don't know if I have cautionary tales, but one thing I say that I've learned over the past 15 years is that organizations evolve. And in this environment, they evolve very quickly. So I have been caught unawares, like, I don't know, this thing worked 4 years ago, and now it's not. Well, we've increased the number of students by 35,000 in that 4 years. And so we're going to have to do something differently. And it applies to processes and tools. It also, frankly, applies to people, okay? Which is like somebody who's in a job and they're doing a great job, and then 5 years later it's not working. It's because the environment has changed and the person hasn't. And you have to, again, as a leader, you have to be able to make hard decisions about who's in the job and who's not in the job and whether people are progressing. And so I don't think that's a cautionary tale. It's just something to be aware of. And continuing to always provide upskilling and professional development, even for the people in your organization, but also recognizing when somebody in your organization should move on is always important.
That's good. Well,
Sorry,
we have
I've got a whole line of people here sitting here who work for me too. That was not meant to be cautionary about anything.
Okay, I think you need to change, right? roll with change. We have about less than 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask another lightning round question. So here, since I'm going to ask an AI question, since that's always somewhat top of mind for everybody. So the question is. We know AI is here, affecting everything from teaching and learning to research to institutional operations. Is your current approach within your units, is it a wait and see, building internal capacity? Are you partnering, or has it changed your approach to innovation? So, James, go ahead.
So we can all get in here. We're certainly embracing AI. We're trying to experiment as much as we can within our team, but we're also trying to build it into our own workflows so we can be more aware of the opportunity and the pain. So when we're working with people across campus, we're better informed. I think what it's hopefully changing for a lot of institutions is to be more nuanced about partnership with ed tech companies in general. It's not build it all or buy it all. There's a lot of gray space between, and that's a real opportunity in the AI space in particular.
Tom?
Want to second what James just said about it's not about build or buy, it's about build and buy, and understanding that these tools are still very immature, and so you're going to have to cobble components together to get what you want out of them, and a year from now it'll be different. It has not changed our approach to innovation. It's just the latest tool that's been made available to us to drive innovation and to create the conversations we want to have around innovation. And I think what we're doing, because of the power that is coming and the velocity at which they're evolving, you were really trying to frame, back to something Phil referenced, which is how do we reimagine a future? At a time when it's really easy to get caught into just playing defense, we're really trying to push the word reimagine into we have an opportunity to rethink how we deliver services, how we educate students, how we get administrative work done. We need to take that opportunity with these tools in a very, very challenging environment where we're being challenged around everything and say, let's just not fall into the back and talk about cutting budgets. Let's talk about actually reimagining around a different model where the balance between what a human does and what we allow technology to do is going to be very different. Mm-hmm. And so, it's not changed our innovation, it's changed just kind of what we have available to do innovation.
Yeah, I like that. I think anytime there's innovation, right, it's always like, do you build, do you buy, do you partner? I think that's a good framework. So, Suzanne, what is the approach?
Yeah, I'll second what both Tom and James have said already. And I guess the approach we're taking at Bentley right now is really a sort of a learning teams approach around experimentation, but purposeful experimentation. And so we've created a structure and a set of learning teams, and we're going through a process to discover together what opportunities exist and make sure that everyone can really feel part of it.
Bill?
Yeah, so it's a complicated answer, but I'd say first off, we're lucky enough at ASU to have a big central unit that's focused on creating the infrastructure upon which learning and teaching tools can take place and be developed. So inside EdPlus, we're using it, I'd say most interestingly, we are and have now created and are piloting an agentic tutor in a biology course, which is fantastic, and it was a very big achievement and a very hard thing to do, and it required lots and lots of fine-tuning that will continue now and throughout the summer until it goes full bore in the fall. But we're also creating smaller tools that allow students, for example, to practice their German skills. Now, we worked with a German professor because she wanted to work with us. But the beauty of that is now that we've developed it, this particular tool can be used not just for other languages where we have much higher enrollments like Spanish, but it can also be used to tutor other things that are very singular. It can be used to do Socratic method with the law school, for example. So we're slowly making progress. We're slowly using the tools, but we are embracing AI in a big way.
Thank you. So we don't have time for this question, which I think is an important question, but since mostly it's higher ed and not so much ed tech here, one of the things that I have found fascinating working with leaders of academic innovation and change is that back in the day of early technology, you would go to the CIO. But now these units and these leaders have technology woven and people that are actually looking at technology within their units. And I know when we had a conversation about this panel, there was this affinity to be open to co-creating and at the forefront. Just don't show up with like, here's the great widget. I think you should use it, or trying to find a problem to solve for something you already built, but to be co-creative. So there's a lot of depth there and what you can do to partner with creating solutions with these leaders of academic innovation. Thank you for being a part of this panel. Let's give them a round of applause, and thank you to the audience.